invite the next witness.
Defense calls Dr. John Landers.
Dr. Landers, good morning. If you'll come this way, Madam Clerk will place you under oath.
Do swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes. Thank you. We'll have you take a seat in the witness chair. Counsel, you may inquire.
Dr. Landers, will you tell us your name and spell your last name?
Sure. It's John Landers, Landers.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Idaho.
How long have you done that?
I've been licensed in the state of Idaho since 2006. I've been working as a psychologist since 2002.
And where did you go to school?
I got my bachelor's degree at BYU in Provo, and then I went to Idaho State in Pocatello and got my master's and doctorate there.
Your Honor, the court's very familiar with this witness, so this testimony is for the court for establishing his credentials.
May we stipulate to his credentials? And
If they stipulate to his credentials, like he's skip over that.
All I'm going to say is the judge knows this witness, so very good.
And I do accept him as an expert, so Mr. Archibald, you may proceed.
Dr. Landers, do you know Jeremy Best?
I do.
And how do you know him?
I have met with him on 2 occasions as an evaluator for different purposes.
And have you submitted a report to Judge Watkins in relation to this case?
Yes.
Was that pursuant to a court order?
Yes, it was.
And I have a report that's dated May 14th of 2025 that's entitled Psychological Assessment from John Landers. Would that be your report?
That sounds accurate, yes.
Okay. And so when you receive a court order to produce a psychological assessment, what do you do?
The first thing I would do is read through the order and make sure that I understand what the order is requesting. And then I reach out to typically the defense, but whomever I need to reach out to and ask for the documentation that I would need to perform the evaluation. Once I review that, then I would meet with the individual, do the assessment, and then I would formalize the assessment and then return it to the court.
Was this order from Judge Watkins, did it have specific questions for the court, for you to answer for the court?
Yes, per the statute 19-2522.
Do you recall what those questions are?
I would have to go back to the statute or the order to read them. I don't have them memorized.
Is the first question a diagnosis, evaluation, or prognosis of the mental condition of the defendant?
That would sound correct. That would be one of the criteria.
And number 2, an analysis of the degree of the defendant's illness or defect and level of functional impairment.
That sounds accurate as well.
And number 3, a consideration of whether treatment is available for the defendant's mental condition.
Yes.
And number 4, an analysis of the relative risks and benefits of treatment or non-treatment.
Yes.
And number 5, a consideration of the risk of danger which the defendant may create for the public at large.
Yes.
And so those are questions that are set out in Idaho code.
Those are standard, yes.
And the judge asked or ordered you to do that assessment, is that right?
That is correct.
And so did you do it?
I did.
And is this the report that you filed on May 14th of 2025?
Yes.
documents did you review as part of this as a psychological assessment?
Quite a few. They're outlined in the report. I would be certainly happy to read through that out loud if you would like, but I would need the report, but there are quite a few documents.
The report has been provided to the court, and counsel, can I hand him my copy?
You may.
Well, Judge, this is cumulative. Is there a reason for him to be reading something that's already been seen?
Well, I don't know that it would read it all, allows some latitude for examination that you would present to it.
Well, I know what it is, I'm just saying what the judge has.
So I think the last question was, did you review documents in preparing your report?
I did.
And what documents did you review?
Would you like me to read through those that are listed on the report?
Yes, if you don't remember off the top of your head, because you do so many of these, go ahead, then I'm okay with you just referring to this.
Judge, what is the value of him reading a list that the court can read itself?
Are we just establishing some foundation that he has reviewed some material?
Yeah.
Okay. Generally, then just, perhaps you could just summarize the kinds of things that you recall in preparation for the report.
Certainly. Thank you. So I'll just summarize.
Yeah.
Okay. So psychological records, there were a few of those that were provided. Also some medical records I reviewed. Quite a few of those were provided as well, spanned several years. There were some forensic records that were provided also as part of the investigation. Some law enforcement reports were provided as well as some collateral information I obtained. I also reviewed some financial and education records. Those were the records I reviewed.
And does that help you understand how to begin on your psychological assessment?
Certainly, in particular, the violence risk assessment that's requested as part of the 1925-22 order requires that I have data other than from the defendant themselves. I can't just rely upon self-report, and so that data is helpful to be able to gather that information to do that violence risk assessment.
Did you do a mental status or observation of Mr. Best's behavior?
Yes, I did.
And how did you do that?
Through observation, through questioning, looking at the responses to those questions, also through collateral information from the jail, how they're behaving outside of my presence, because sometimes people behave differently when they're being evaluated versus when they don't know they're being watched.
And so did you meet with Jeremy Best in the jail?
I did.
And did you talk to family or friends of Jeremy Best?
I talked to his mother. I didn't talk to anybody else as far as collaterals go.
And you talked to jail staff?
Yes.
And did you review jail records?
Yes. Those are part of the records that I reviewed, was jail records.
And what were the results of your evaluation?
Could you be a little bit more specific, because 18-page report.
Yes, I'll be more specific. Did you do a clinical interview for a DSM diagnosis?
I did.
And what does that mean?
Well, the DSM was the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for psychiatry, psychology, so it basically outlines all of the potential diagnoses that one could use. It's based off the ICD system, which is like a disease registry that is a world-known disease registry. And it just lists off different symptoms that someone might display, and then helps you categorize what disorder is typically associated with those symptoms.
Did you do a scale of intelligence called is it Wechsler?
That's the WIS, or not the WIS, that's the WASI-2. So Wechsler produces several. Yeah.
And what does that mean?
What's the Wechsler Adult Scale of Intelligence? It's abbreviated, and so it's the second version of just a brief assessment that allows me to determine someone's level of intelligence.
And did you do a violence risk scale?
Yes.
What is that about?
It's a structured professional judgment assessment tool, which means there are some criteria that you're looking for. And that particular assessment looks at both static and dynamic factors, so things that stay the same will never change or usually don't change, versus dynamic, which means that could change today versus tomorrow versus a year from now. And so there's a structure to it, and basically you're looking at information you gain partially from the defendant, but primarily from records, to look historically and determine whether or not someone is on the scale 0 to 4 at their level of risk across those factors.
In your report, you mentioned you took into account static risk factors. What does that mean?
An example of that would be like age. That's not something that Mr. Best is going to be able to influence. But statistically, it is related to risk. And so it's something that we would look at when we're doing the risk assessment.
The risk of a 20-year-old versus a 50-year-old, those are different.
They are different statistically, yes.
And did you consider Jeremy Best's criminal and legal history?
Yes.
Did the prosecutor provide that information to you?
Both the prosecutor and the defense provided quite a bit of information, so I would assume yes. I can't remember who provided exactly what.
Do you recall your static risk summary?
I can certainly give you a general idea, but it's summarized in the report probably better than I'm going to recall, but yes.
Okay. You took into account acute psychiatric instability. What does that mean?
Well, acute would be like in the moment, right? Psychiatric instability would be in this moment. Are they displaying psychosis, so delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thoughts, bizarre behaviors, etc.
And as part of your psychological assessment, did you consider substance use and relapse potential?
Yes.
Did you consider Jeremy Best's social support in his environment?
That's part of it, yes.
Did you consider Jeremy Best's insight and attitude toward treatment?
Definitely.
What was, in your conclusion, what was your diagnostic impression of Jeremy Best?
The primary diagnosis that is of concern is his bipolar disorder. That was diagnosed over 20 years ago, so that's not really a question. But yeah, that's the primary concern that we have. There is also a history of substance use, which is also a concern.
Bipolar I disorder, most recent episode, manic with psychotic features. What does that mean?
Yeah. So let's just start with bipolar. So bi meaning two. So we've got two different sets of cycling mood, where we go between two different areas of mood. One would be mania and the other would be depression. And so a manic episode would last for a week or longer. It's not substance induced, or at least it has to be independent of that, even though substances may be involved. And so it would be like a grandiose mood, meaning a very high, elevated sense of self. It would be elevated energy, risky behavior, things of that nature. Again, not strictly related to substance use. But then there's an alternating mood of depression. And so it's not like someone would be manic and then immediately depressed, but across the course of time, you would have episodes of low mood, 2 weeks or longer, where the person has any number of symptoms. There's actually 9 different symptoms you can have to create a major depressive disorder episode. But that's the cycling mood between that mania and that depression. As far as psychosis, not all mania has psychosis, but when someone is manic and they're psychotic, then they have that additional component of delusions. So they could be delusions of grandeur, they could be paranoia. So it depends on the individual.
And that's what you diagnosed Jeremy Best with, was the manic with psychotic features.
That was his most recent episode. Yeah.
And the most recent episode you're talking about, November 30th of 2023 and December 2nd of 2023.
From the history that I could gather, yes, that's the most recent episode that I would be referring to.
And you also indicated cannabis use disorder. What does that mean?
Well, cannabis would be the formal name we give to marijuana or THC. So he was using it at a level that was problematic.
And an alcohol use disorder. What does that mean?
Similar to cannabis use disorder, but now not cannabis, it's the use of alcohol in a way that's problematic. It creates functional deficits.
And you point out in your report that he has a history of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Is that what we commonly call ADHD?
Right. It was formerly called ADD, but it's the same thing. It was diagnosed when he was young.
And so that was a brief overall of your report. What were your conclusions and recommendations?
More specifically, or?
And I don't mind if you turn to the back of your report.
Sure. It's fairly lengthy. I guess I would just ask for maybe conclusions and recommendations with regard to his risk, or with regard to treatment, or
Let's talk about all of them.
all of them. Okay. So let's just start with treatment. He would require forever treatment, never-ending treatment for his bipolar 1 disorder. That requires medication management. It is not something that you can cure, and it's something that if you don't treat it, it's going to get worse over time. So he needs to be on medications at all times to be able to treat those episodes. So that's the first recommendation.
So the bipolar 1 doesn't go away.
No.
It's something that he needs to manage with medication forever.
Correct.
And is there also counseling available for bipolar 1?
You can certainly receive counseling to assist you to gain insight, to assist you to cope with perhaps the secondary factors related to it. So let's talk about grief and loss, for example, or denial, or let's talk about the side effects that I don't like, but it doesn't really address the actual disease, it more addresses the secondary reactions to the disease or the treatment. So certainly counseling could be helpful, but medication is necessary.
And is there, do you know of if there is treatment available in the prison system?
Yeah, I would assume that there would be. It would be required if there's a condition to treat that.
Has he been offered treatment while in the jail?
Yes, yes.
And what kind of treatment is that?
Medication management. So they have a formulary that they base their medications off of. It wouldn't necessarily be the formulary that's available to him in the community. He's using private insurance or Medicaid. But nonetheless, it's medication that has been approved for that disorder.
And are you aware, was he prescribed this medication while he's been in the jail?
He has been prescribed that medication.
Has he always taken it?
No.
Do you know the reason why?
I asked him why he wasn't taking it when I evaluated him this last episode, yes.
And what did he tell you?
He didn't like the side effects. He also felt like he was functioning reasonably well without it. And he also stated that he would restart it in the fall, which is when he tends to cycle.
Okay. So he understands that he needs the medication.
Partially, I would say.
And he went off of it, do you know for how long in the jail?
I can't tell you if he's taking it now, so I don't know if it's continued, but at the time I had interviewed him, it had been less than a month that he'd been off of it, according to the medical folks at the jail.
And as far as you know, there were no violent episodes in the jail when he was off of the medicine.
During that period of time where he had stopped, so when I had seen him, no, there were not.
Is it possible for rehabilitation of Jeremy Best?
Can you define what you're meaning by rehabilitation?
That's just one of the areas in this form that you fill out. Possibility of rehabilitation and risk mitigation in the future. That's at the end of your report.
Okay. So, sorry, my brain was on bipolar, right? So if I'm thinking about that particular disease, the answer would be not really, right? Because it's a chronic disease and it requires treatment. In my mind, rehabilitation means that you're now back to normal, right? You're at a baseline condition. If we're talking about risk, though, if we switch to risk, I do believe that it is possible, and I've outlined all of the factors in my report that I would require to make that judgment. I can't make the judgment right now if that will happen, but you're asking about possibility in the United States.
And your possibility of risk mitigation, you recommend to the court a lengthy period of demonstrated psychiatric stability. What does that mean?
Well, let's go with the different words I used. Lengthy, I'm talking about years, right? Because we've got someone who cycles, let's say every fall, that's what he's saying, he cycles every fall. When he was in the community before, he had a couple of years where he was advocating for treatment, he was committed to treatment, and had no non-compliance concerns and did really well. But then slowly started to not comply. So we would need years where he's not picking and choosing and he's staying with it and has the insight that even if he's feeling okay, he's still going to take his medication. As far as psychiatric stability, what do I mean by that? I would mean no episodes, right? So no episodes of mania, no episodes of depression, no episodes of violence, whatnot. So any of the symptoms that we're concerned about, we haven't observed them for years because he's been compliant with his treatment and he retains insight into that.
And do you know if the treatment available in prison is similar to the treatment provided to him in the jail?
I would say it's medications. In that case, it's similar. Is the formulary the same? I'm not privy to the formulary, so I don't know if it's exactly the same or somewhat different.
Do you know of the side effects of the medications that Jeremy Best was on in the jail?
I can generally tell you, I'm not a medical doctor, but I could generally tell you what the known side effects are, yes.
Go ahead.
True. Primarily it's lethargy, so that'd be like physical slowness, cognitive slowness, and then metabolism concerns like weight gain. Those are the primary issues. And then you have the secondary issues because of that, right? So if I gain a lot of weight, then I'm going to have other health issues like sleep apnea or potential heart disease concerns or cholesterol issues, triglyceride issues, right? So there are those secondary issues that are caused potentially from the primary concerns.
And did Jeremy tell you that the reason why he went off of his meds for a short period of time in the jail?
He cited those primary reasons and also the secondary reasons, yes.
So lethargy, meaning it kind of numbs your senses as to what's going on around you.
That would be a good description.
And weight gain, we all know what that is. By your observations, has he gained weight while being in jail on those meds?
From time 1 to time 2, when I saw him first versus this time, the difference would be approximately a little bit more than a year between those episodes, yes.
He did gain weight while he was in the jail.
That was my observation. I haven't seen a scale, but my observation is yes.
If Jeremy Best were to ever get parole, would it be important that he stay on his meds?
100%.
Would it be important that he have treatment program, like with a counselor?
Yes.
Would a structure, for example, a parole officer, be important?
It would be a component important, but not enough, right?
And the supervision requirements via, if he's granted parole, that would include medication, counseling, a parole officer. Can you think of anything else that he would need?
Yes, certainly. You would want to make sure that the environment that he's living in, the housing was appropriate. You'd want to make sure the relationships that you were engaging in were appropriate. Certainly there would need to be substance abuse testing that was frequent and random, so we can make sure that there's no substance use. And I would say that not that those services, we've already talked about the services that need to be in place, but there would need to be a review of those services. So like the parole officer would need to have 100% availability to be able to review the medical records, psychological records, counseling records, whatever, so that they can verify that there's participation and investment in that. So,
And is that typically what's, all those services are provided through the Idaho Department of Corrections Parole Department?
I would assume so. I don't know if it's typical, but I would assume that they would have to be provided through the correctional environment. He's not going to be able to provide them through his own private means.
So the danger to society, can that be mitigated with what you're talking about?
I believe so.
Has Jeremy Best been dangerous in the jail
Yes.
in the last year and a half?
He's been in jail for how long? Remind me.
December 2nd, 2023.
So, in the last year and a half, my knowledge would be no, he has not been. It was the initial phase of his incarceration when that was a concern.
And the initial phase, was that before the antipsychotic medications took effect?
Correct.
Since he's been on his psychotic meds, he's followed the rules in jail.
Correct.
And those psychotic medications, did they start like a week after he was in jail, or a couple of days, or do you know?
I'm not recalling exactly what the medical records stated. I do know that I saw him about 3 weeks after he was in jail, and by then he had restabilized.
All right. Thank you, doctor, for your assessment.
Thank you. Mr. Neal?
Thank you. How many of your interviews, especially with inmates, I assume you do both inmates and private clients, is that right?
I only do forensic evaluations
Meaning,
for the court.
and so everyone that you interview is someone who has been involved in the criminal justice system.
Yes, I do other work, but not clinical work, right? So I may be interviewing someone in a foreign country for national security, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about today.
And so, what would you say the number of folks that you interact with are assessed with some form of bipolar?
Like a percentage?
Sure.
I'd say probably 20% or so, because my particular population is a very select sample, right?
But fairly common.
Yeah, it's not uncommon.
And how about with the psychosis? Is that common?
With the population of folks that get referred for my type of evaluation, it's not uncommon, yes.
And so those are the kind of factors you put into the tool that you use to assess risk.
It's part of it, yeah.
Okay. And I mean, we're really asking you to kind of look in the crystal ball, right?
That's correct.
And you know, I had a couple of friends, and one was an engineer, and the other was had a psychology degree. The engineer always made fun of psychology, because he said it was soft science. You heard that term before?
A couple times.
So, if I'm understanding that correctly, so the engineer, if he sees something happen, like, what do they call it, Newton's cradle?
I'm not an engineer, I don't know.
Fair enough. But he expects certain laws to be followed and reproduced, right?
And so does the psychologist.
All right. But in the soft science, what's the difference?
The difference would be a bias, because the engineer, what they don't understand is quantum physics, where you actually can't predict where an electron is at any given time.
Sure, it's a matter of,
It's a
we
guess.
live in a chaotic world, right? You agree with that?
I do agree that we live in a chaotic world, and there is no such thing as soft science.
And so what it boils down to in your assessment in this particular case is there's a lot of unknowns. Fair to say?
I would say that there are some unknowns. I don't know that
Significant unknowns.
well, that's your statement, that's not my statement.
Would you adopt that statement then? Is there significant unknowns in what you're trying to assess?
I would just stick with unknowns personally, because significant is a quantity that I would say there's probably 5 unknowns that I'm really uncomfortable with.
These are the dynamic that you referred to earlier.
Those are the
dynamic.
high-risk concerns, yeah.
Those high-risk concerns. And those are the ones that we don't know how those are going to flesh out, right?
That's correct.
And so to do a prediction, really, without knowing where those dynamic factors are going, would be almost impossible to make a 100% risk assessment.
It depends on how we talk about prediction. So if I can elaborate, I don't know.
Sure. I think what you're going to say is there's limitations on the risk assessment, right?
No,
There's no limits.
no, that's not what I was going to say.
Okay, go ahead.
So I think what we have to understand is that we're not predicting behavior.
Okay.
That's impossible. If I would have known that, I wouldn't have shown up today at 10 a.m. Right? I would have known I could have shown up at 11 a.m.
Oh,
I didn't know what you guys were going to do today. So I had to predict risk. I knew there was a risk I might be called at 10:30. And so I showed up early enough to where if that happened, I'd be here. Right?
precautions.
Yeah. So what we do is we predict risk.
Absolutely.
And risk is based on statistics. And statistics requires us to understand several factors. What we're talking about is a low base rate behavior. A low base rate behavior is very difficult to predict as far as the actual behavior. When is it going to happen? Who's going to do it? Murder, suicide, things like that. We're not good at that because it's a low base rate behavior. You have to go to your Taylor-Russell tables, which are statistical tables. You have to know your base rates. You have to know the accuracy of your assessment tool. And you put all those things together. Unless you have 100% accuracy, you're going to have a lot of inaccuracy in your prediction of specific behavior. However, and I want to finish this because I'm not quite done, if we look at risk, we can categorize risk as high, medium, low with a great deal of accuracy based on baseline predictions from past behaviors. And so when I make my assessment of risk, I'm fairly confident in my assessment of whether something's high risk, moderate, or low risk.
Yeah, but of those 3 categories, you agree as far as the judge's ability to rely upon them, probably medium would be the least useful, and moderate would be the least useful. Let me explain what I mean by that. If you tell the judge he's a high risk, he's not going to have to worry. You say he's a low risk, you can rely on that. Medium's a toss of the coin, right?
That's a good question for the judge.
Yeah. And that's the, I guess the limitation on what you can help the judge with.
Yep.
And when you said that it was a moderate risk, you also said, I think I'm using words like significant qualifier. Is that right?
Well, I think in my report I said moderate high risk. I don't think I said high, or I don't think I said moderate. I do think I qualify as a moderate high risk. So I kind of jumped to one side of the scale, if you will.
And the reason we have this high risk section is not because so much of the historical information,
That's right, it's not static, it's dynamic.
And, but now I don't think you had some information on a card on it. Okay. That had to do with a event that occurred in 2019, which was an aggravated assault with a gun. Did you have that when you were doing this for us?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. There was no charges.
Well, it's, whether it was charged or not, I think he wants to know about it as far as his risk
I'll
assessment.
permit
Well,
some brief line
And I disagree. If it's not a charge, is it going to get reported? It wasn't reported from the prosecutors. It wasn't reported by me because there was no charge. So are we?
I'll rephrase it.
Thank you, and that's the understanding the court would be able to process and knowing that no charge resulted.
Sure, and that's a legal determination. You don't do legal determinations, right?
I am not the final decider, yes.
And if he had been accused, if there had been facts that came out of an incident that involved potential violence, the threat of violence, that would have been useful to
Facts, yeah, certainly.
you. And I want to talk about that just a little bit. So if there's no precursors, we want this historical record, then that would tend to, on this tool that you use, and I'm calling it a tool. Is it an instrument or is it a tool? Is there a difference?
I wouldn't have any issue with you calling it a tool or an instrument. It doesn't hurt my feelings either way.
And a lot of this is going to be subjective calls, right? You've got a framework here, but it's not like you give them a multiple choice test like a personality test or something like that.
It's what we call structured professional judgment. So in there you can tell me that there is subjectivity.
And that sounds really cool, but basically what it is, it gives you the list of factors to put into your judgment, right?
Yeah,
And those are reflected in your report.
correct.
Okay. And one of those, of course, one of those factors, and this is based on as much as you know, there's going to be a limitation to what you know about carrying arrest, right?
Absolutely.
There's actually going to be some biases that come into it, perhaps unintentional.
Well, that's the nature of not understanding all information.
Right. And when you met with collateral sources, one was his mother, and you took into account that his mother probably has bias.
Of course.
And when you say you met with jail staff, how many of the jail staff did you meet
I met with the medical provider or
with? Brian Meeker.
and
Sorry, I missed that, Mr. Young.
Brian Meeker.
it's MECHA. And I also asked the officers that were around at the time, so it was probably 2 or 3,
I see.
about his behavior.
Well, slow down there. So when you went to meet him, you met with him twice in the jail. Right?
2 different times, yes.
And so the first time you went in, you were doing a different type of assessment.
That's
right?
correct.
You were trying to see if he was fit to stand trial.
It was 18 to 11, yes.
Okay, and the judge knows what that is, so we don't have to go into it. But when you went there, did you talk to jailers?
I asked the correctional officers at both occasions what his functional behaviors were. So is he doing X, Y, and Z, or what are you observing? Those are facts, right?
Well, sure, but it depends on who's actually there and how much interaction you've had.
Right, and that's what they usually say is, well, I haven't been around, and I will ask them how many times have you been on shift when he's been whatever. But yeah, I would ask those questions of the people that have been observing.
Met with his mother, met with Brian Meekum. Did you meet with Mary Blue?
I met with, I'm going to use video if that's okay, right? Or, so we had an interaction, yes. Did I meet with her personally? No. But yes, I did.
And she presented you with quite a bit of information.
She did.
That's the lady right there.
Yeah, that's her.
All right. And so in order to make these professional assessments and so forth, it's pertinent that the information that's coming in isn't skewed. Right?
Certainly.
Now, when we talk about your use of the historical information, if there hasn't been any interaction that you're aware of, then you're going to be saying, well, this may be a lower risk than the opposite, right?
So for example, if I don't have a really important piece of information that wasn't provided to me, is my judgment going to be correct?
And the answer is
No.
yeah. And also the fact that this particular tool or instrument puts emphasis on that, it could potentially create a false outcome simply because the instrument doesn't take in the totality of the circumstances and doesn't give you the same. I'm not comparing the defendant to anyone, but I want to use some examples that I know you're aware of, and I think generally the judge, everybody else is. So let's take Ted Bundy. He's a serial killer. So by the time he was interviewed after 25 murders, 28 murders, this scale would have been off the charts, right?
Correct.
He had this long history of being very violent. But if you had the same assessment with the man in Las Vegas, at Mandalay Bay, no prior interaction with the law enforcement at all, just using this tool, he would have a lower risk assessment perhaps than Ted Bundy.
So we're talking about after or before the shooting?
Let's take the shoot right after the shooting. You're called in. It's a mass murder. It's a mass shooting. A lot of death. Very serious. Would you take that into consideration when you're comparing that risk, as opposed to saying, well, historically, he didn't do anything prior to
Well, if you're asking in the end, would I consider someone like the Las Vegas shooter a high risk, the answer would be of course.
that? Of course. And that's because of the nature of what happened, not so much whether or not there have been events that led up to it.
And that's the strength of this tool, because you can have different individuals with very different histories, and you could come out with a risk assessment that's still accurate, because it is accurate. That doesn't have to be based on, it's not a formula that, everybody that does certain things versus other things is going to be ranked differently. It's
Sure, but you in fact did rely on that. It's in your report, right? You talked about the fact that it didn't have this ingrained sense of violence, right?
at a moment in time, but when you go to the end of my assessment, it's very clear that I'm at the moderate to high level.
Because of the nature of what happened, right?
Well, not just that. That would be I think a minimization of where the risk comes from.
I'm with you, but this is a big deal. A familicide,
Is that a question?
if you wait, I'll give you the chance for you to speak.
Okay.
This is a familicide, correct?
Yes.
So we're talking about, it's also known as family annihilation.
Whatever it's called, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And so when you have eliminated your wife, the unborn child, and that's one incident, right? Right?
One incident, meaning that we have one instance of him doing that.
One incident in that the child, the unborn child, and the mother were killed at the same time.
Okay, yes.
And then you have a delay. And then he then takes the life of a 10-year-old child. Right?
Yes, and his dog.
And the dog. If that dog had been another child, that'd be fit the definition of mass murder. Or more.
Or what?
Or mass murder. Or more. Right?
Yes.
So these are four killings. One happens to be an animal. Two of them at the same time, but then you don't know exactly when the second part happened. Potentially 30 hours later.
Your Honor, is Mr. Neal a witness, or is he asking questions?
It does begin to feel a little argumentative, counsel. I'd have you make the inquiry.
Okay. Yeah, Judge, in trying to get the assessment of this particular prediction that is given to the court, I mean, I really do have to, pinpoint those weaknesses, I guess, of just what the court would consider. I just want to be aware that all of those factors you were aware of, right?
All of those factors, meaning that he killed his wife,
Yes,
He killed his unborn child, Freya. He
yes.
killed Zeke, and he killed his dog.
And Zeke was a 10-month, right? You were aware of that.
Yes.
And you were also aware that this 10-month-old was probably nonverbal.
As most 10-months-old are.
You assume that as far as your understanding of the circumstances, right?
It would be statistically abnormal for him to have any words.
Exactly. So no way for him to verbally provoke this defendant, right?
Well, okay, not with words, but that's a strange question, I guess. I'm not
Well, just
understanding.
answer my strange question. There's no way for him to use words to provoke a violent response.
That is an accurate question, I would say no.
There you go. And at 10 months, no threat, no reasonable threat, no rational threat. And yet, wouldn't you say that the vast majority of humanity would have a difficult time overcoming that impulse in us not to cause injury to a 10-month-old child?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate.
That was a significant, he had to overcome that. But not only that, it was his son. Right?
Correct.
And you would think both of those factors, that is a substantial, that most people couldn't get to. That is a substantial level most people couldn't
I would like to clarify with a yes or no answer here.
get to. Well, what's the yes or no first?
What's your question?
That is a substantial level that a person has to reach to set aside whatever is natural innocent that protects children, and especially our own child.
It is substantial, therefore, you would have to understand a lot more as to what allowed for that overcoming.
Well, and I can agree with that wholeheartedly. The question, I mean, how common is this?
Well, how common is the reason the person came? So you have to understand that reason.
Sure, but you would, in your experience and in your studies and so forth, this family annihilation, how common is it?
Well, obviously that's very rare, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the reason the person overcame family violation. If they were able to engage in that, what allowed them to do that?
The number of people who've done that statistically.
That action is very rare, thankfully.
Very rare. And that's the situation we have here.
We're not in debate about what happened. So,
I'm not asking you to debate. I'm asking you, that's the situation we have here. That very rare circumstance where he overcame, where he reached that level and he acted. That's the situation that you were asked to assess.
that is part of the situation. Yes.
All right. And because of that substantial factor, the risk is significantly high.
Absolutely.
And that, I guess, kind of leads to this final area. Because somebody suffers from mental health, that doesn't equate that they're going to be violent.
It depends on the disorder.
Correct. That's a yes, right? Just because somebody has mental health, they're not going to be necessarily violent.
Mental health is a very broad category, so I would say it depends on the disorder.
Sure. And in this case, bipolar, being bipolar doesn't mean you're going to be automatic.
It increases the risk, but it doesn't automatically mean you're going to.
All right. Do you have any kind of percentage of a bipolar diagnosed individual who is violent?
Not at the tip of my tongue, no, I don't.
Small.
It's higher risk than the average individual, so it's small but higher.
And then the number that will be actually homicidal.
Obviously, less than the number that would be violent.
Very. Right.
Right, and this is not, homicide is rare.
And this is,
So,
this type of homicide, extremely.
correct.
All right. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Mr. Archibald?
consider the events that happened to Callie and Freya and Zeke, do you consider that one continuous event? That was over a couple of days.
I would call it an episode. Obviously, there were different events within the episode, but I would categorize them as happening all in one episode.
And so these psychotic features, managed with psychotic features, as far as you could determine, there was one psychotic feature that lasted 2 or 3 days.
Well, it's more complex than that because now we have drugs involved, right? So there were drugs and there was psychosis and yes, there was mania. But all of those were present during this episode.
So the prosecutor asked you for a hypothetical. If someone accused Jeremy Best of being violent and the sheriff investigated and no charges were filed, would that make a difference in your assessment?
Could you repeat that question? I don't know if I truly understood it.
So the prosecutor gave you a hypothetical about Jeremy Best being violent with someone else back in 2019.
Okay.
So if would it change your assessment if someone accused Jeremy of being violent and the sheriff investigated and the sheriff brought no charges against Jeremy, would that change your opinion?
Potentially. If I had all of the facts, if I had all of the information and it was compelling that, let's be honest, sometimes people aren't charged for different reasons, but we can factually say behavior still occurred even though charges weren't brought. Or the court dismissed, what happened. It potentially could change my opinion. So I just didn't have that information.
The prosecutors gave you information, but they didn't give you that information.
I requested as much information from the defense and the prosecutor as they felt I needed to make a good decision.
So even incidents that have been investigated but found to be not true, sometimes that weighs in your opinion, sometimes not.
That's a little different question.
Just wait. Is he asking a hypothetical, or is he trying to talk about his situation? Because that would be facts that are clearly not considered.
Counsel, do you want to clarify whether you're speaking of a hypothetical?
I was just following up on their questions about their hypothetical.
Which you may do.
You remember the question?
Yes, I do. So I would say it's a little bit different question because the way it was stated, well, if you could repeat it, I want to make sure I respond to it directly. There was something different about it.
So if the sheriff investigated and found that allegations against Jeremy Best in 2019 of being violent were not true,
That's the difference.
would that affect your assessment?
So the difference in the question there, again, we're talking hypothetically. The way it was stated just then is that it was found that it was not true. Okay, so let's say that there was an accusation and it was actually shown that that was a false allegation. Well, that's very different. That wouldn't be something that I would account for, obviously, in a risk assessment because it was false. Versus charges just were brought. That's not necessarily the same thing.
And how do you figure out if it's true or not? Isn't that from whether the sheriff filed charges or not?
Well, there's other ways to find out truth.
Yeah. Any questions from the prosecutor today that make you change your opinion from May 14th, 2025?
No, very good questions, but I retain, based on the facts that I was able to have in my opinion.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, counsel. Thank you, Dr. Landers.